Okay, well, I have spent 25 years of my life in tobacco control and tobacco behavior research. I work now, as Carl said, as a research director at a governmental institute, and my wage is fully paid by the Norwegian taxpayers, so I get no ties to any industry whatsoever. And in fact, I've been an expert witness in 5 court cases against the tobacco industry. And this anti-tobacco baggage made it rather difficult for me to cope with the fact that availability to another tobacco product in fact would turn out to be beneficial to public health. It really took a lot of research to make me realize this, and my intention now is to share with you some of the empirical observation which turned my attitude from hostility to favor snus as an effective way to reduce smoking in a country that has already implemented just about everything the WHO has recommended. The modern type of low-toxic, low-nitrosamine snus was introduced to the Norwegian nicotine market during the 1990s. And in this slide you can see that in 1985, less than 5% of the tobacco was consumed as snus, but today snus make up about 1/3 of the market. And I believe in Sweden, more than 50% of tobacco is consumed as snus. So the first point I would make is that the increased market share of snus has occurred without increasing the overall consumption of tobacco. Since 1985, the volume of tobacco consumed by Norwegians has been reduced by 20%, even if you include the supply sources as border trade, smuggling, tax-free, etc. So snus has captured a larger share of the nicotine market on behalf of cigarettes without increasing the total volume of tobacco consumed. There are primarily 2 mechanisms that can explain this market shift. Firstly, tobacco-prone youth has been picking up snus instead of cigarettes, as illustrated in this slide. Here you can see that the increase in snus use among young adults is paralleled by a dramatic reduction in smoking. And as you can see, smoking rates start to drop as snus use increases. Now this was first observed among young men, but has now also occurred among young women. And I can't really recall seeing any other country with this speed of reduction in smoking onset. Some have been concerned that snus use might serve as a gateway into smoking. Now, if such a gateway really existed, we should expect to see that the increase of snus was followed by an increase in smoking. But as you can see, the pattern is quite opposite. So on the contrary, there are reasons to believe that the inverse relationship between snus use and smoking is causal, because the majority of young snus users are made up by former smokers and by young persons with characteristics that predispose for cigarette smoking. Now, the second mechanism for the increase in snus use is that quite a number of established smokers tend to use snus either to reduce their smoking intensity or to try to quit smoking altogether. This slide demonstrates that snus has been the most preferred method to quit smoking among men. Nearly a quarter of male average smokers have used snus in their latest quit attempt. And among females, snus and pharmaceutical nicotine products are evenly used in attempts to quit smoking. The effectiveness of snus in smoking cessation is not determined by the high usage factor alone. We also need to identify the efficacy factor. How effective is snus as a method in quitting smoking? Very often, randomized controlled trials are applied, and these studies indicate that snus do have an effect in an artificial experimental setting. In addition, my research team has observed an effect from snus also in real-world situation in quitting smoking. One method we have used is to compare the ratio for having quit smoking in different snus use categories. These slides present results from none less than 9 large cross-sectional surveys where average smokers have been asked to report their smoking status at the time of the survey. And you can see for yourself that in all 9 studies, comprising more than 40,000 respondents, the quit ratio for smoking was way higher among daily users of snus than among never users of snus. The unweighted mean at the bottom may serve as an illustration of the difference in average smokers currently using snus daily. 72% reported to be totally smoke-free at the time of the survey. And in average smokers not using snus, the quit rate for smoking was only 49%. In one particular study, we compared self-reported outcome of smokers' attempt to quit smoking according to the methods that respondents had used. After adjusting for key potential confounders, including nicotine dependence, a consistent finding was that snus users were 2.5 times more likely to quit smoking than users of nicotine gum or nicotine patch. And the supplier effect from snus over pharmaceutical nicotine was the case despite the fact that users of gum and the patch had greater tendency to use an additional method that normally would increase the probability of a positive result. Not only did snus use increase the probability of a successful quit attempt, it also increased the probability of a considerable reduction in cigarette consumption among those who continued to smoke. Compared to non-users of snus, dual users were 3 times more likely for having greatly reduced smoking intensity. And this was also supported by a later study of dual use where Professor Anne McNeil and myself observed that dual users of snus and cigarettes had a weekly consumption of cigarettes that were 40% lower than that of exclusive smokers. So the data from Norway demonstrate widespread use of snus in quitting smoking attempts. They show that former smokers make up the largest segment among snus users, and they show that snus use is associated with higher quit rates for smoking. And finally, we have also reasons to believe that snus might be more effective to quit smoking than the nicotine gum and the nicotine patch. So from these findings, we can conclude that effectiveness of snus on the population level must have been higher than the use of pharmaceutical nicotine products. Usage is higher and efficacy is better. And that's, of course, somewhat problematic fact for the pharma industry to accept, and for others inside the tobacco control movement, for that matter. If snus is allowed to compete with cigarettes on the nicotine market, many are concerned about dual use, and we should. Potentially dual use might be associated with particular health risks or an increased risk of addiction. But the experience from Norway clearly indicates that the magnitude of dual use is rather small, and the proportion of dual users has not increased. The proportion of dual users, that is the red which in this slide, has been about 4 to 7% among men for the whole period, even if the prevalence of snus users have more than tripled since 1985. That is the red and green area when you take them together. So the overall picture is that snus use is increasing, smoking is declining, and dual use is stable, and the tobacco-free segment of the population is increasing. So dual use does not seem to have jeopardized the role of snus in tobacco harm reduction. In Norway and Sweden, any kind of tobacco advertising has been banned since the mid-1970s. Hence, the uptake of snus has not been driven by the benefit of marketing such as these ads from the US, where smokers are recommended to get rewarded with a switch, to frost their fire, to cheat on their old flame, and to rise above the smoking ban in order to have a drama-free tobacco pleasure in taxi cabs, subways, and bars, etc. It's lots of creativity by here. The transition from cigarettes to snus in Scandinavia has occurred in what the tobacco industry has called the dark market, where the communication to the customers is severely limited. And moreover, the transition has occurred in spite of the fact that the price difference between cigarettes and snus are small. And in spite of the fact that snus has not been recommended as a method in smoking cessation by the health authorities. And also in spite of the fact that smokers tend to overstate the health risk from snus compared with cigarettes. So very little really seem to have nudged smokers in direction of snus. They sort of have found their own way. So we can only imagine how much faster the transition would have been if the regulators had come up with a policy that would have facilitated the transition from cigarettes to snus and not obstructed it. It might have been a missed opportunity here for Scandinavian regulators who tend to assess snus as part of the tobacco problem, as part of the solution of the tobacco problem. And I will elaborate on this in my presentation tomorrow. So I got 5 take-home messages based on the experience from Norway. First, low nitrosamine snus has gained market share on behalf of combustible tobacco. Second, increased snus use has not increased the overall tobacco consumption, but on the contrary, helped to reduce smoking. And this has happened through 2 mechanisms. Snus attracts tobacco-prone youth who otherwise would have started to smoke, and snus also increases quit rates for smoking, functioning as a suitable exit for smokers who for some reasons do not want to make use of the traditional methods for quitting smoking. So point number 3 is lower onset, and point number 4 is increased quitting, and this consequently means lower smoking prevalence. And my last point, number 5, is that availability to snus has not increased the proportion of dual users. Approximately 5% of men are dual users, but then again they consume 40% less cigarettes than exclusive smokers. So these 5 incidents have happened in Sweden. It's now been replicated in Norway, and I can't think of any reason why this should not take place in any other European countries. Because snus is neither a sufficient nor a necessary condition to reduce smoking in a given society, but it certainly helps. So to let snus compete with cigarettes on the nicotine market has way more positive effects than negative effects. And I believe this is also reflected in the health statistics, illustrated by this slide, where you can see that Sweden, with its long history of snus use, not only has the lowest lung cancer mortality, but also the lowest mortality rates from oral cancers. Thank you very much.